Good morning. Today is Sunday, January 31st, 2021. This morning's parsha, the parsha that we'll read this Shabbos, is the parsha of Yisro. And it begins as follows. Vayishma Yisro Kohen Midyan Chosei Moshe. Yisro was a priest in Midyan, which is an area now in Jordan. He was the father-in-law of Moshe, and he heard Eis Kol Asher Asa Lakim LaMoshe LiYisrael Amo. He heard everything that happened between God and the Jewish people. Ki Yotzi Hashem es Yisrael miMitzrayim, God taking the Jews out of Egypt, splitting the Red Sea. Yisro heard what was going on. Vayavo Yisro Chosei Moshe, and Yisro decided, this is something that I really want to be a part of. And he and Moshe's family, who were still in Midian, they all got up and left. They came, they left their home in Midian, and by the way, that's where he was respected, he was known, he was a priest there, he was an important person, but they all came to join Moshe and the Jewish people in the desert. Further, the Torah says, Vayomer Yisro, when Yisro gets there, he says to his son-in-law, Moshe, Baruch Hashem, blessed is God, Asher hitzil eschem miyad Mitzrayim umiyad Paro, that God has saved you from Paro and from Mitzrayim. Asher hitzil es ha'am mitachas yad Mitzrayim, God saved, redeemed the Jewish people from Egypt. Ata yadati. Now I know. Ki gadol Hashem mikol hu Elokim. That God is greater than any of the so-called idols or gods, or there is only one God, and this is the true God. Very interesting. Vayishma Yisro. Yisro heard. But everybody heard. I mean, this was big news. This was on the front page of the New York Times and the Jerusalem Post and Haaretz and the Jewish press. Everybody in the world heard about this. What was so unique about Yisro hearing it? What was so different? And the answer is very simple, but it's very profound. Everyone heard it. Everyone knew what happened. But Yisro heard it and took it to heart. Yisro acted on it. And that's what was unique. And that is such an important lesson that Yisro teaches us. You know, today, we hear so much. We are bombarded by information non-stop. So much comes at us. The real question, of course, is which pieces of information do we not only hear, but understand and internalize and incorporate into our lives? Which pieces of information do we actually act on? Because if we're not doing that, just hearing it makes very little impact. There's an interesting rule in Jewish law, interesting halacha. Shloshim yom kodem achag, 30 days before every holiday, darshim v'lomdim binyanei achag. We are obligated to learn and to study the laws of that holiday, the rules of the holiday, what it means, the significance. Shloshim Yom Kodem, 30 days before. 30 days before Purim, we have to start learning about Purim. 30 days before Pesach, we have to start learning about Pesach. Let me ask you a question. What about the day after Pesach? Is it still a mitzvah to learn the laws of Pesach on the day after Pesach? Does that qualify as Talmud Torah, the study of Torah, on the day after Pesach? Of course it does. But learning Torah ideally should be not just intellectual, it should be put into practice. When we study 30 days before it's going to be relevant, that is learning that is not only accumulating facts and widening our understanding, that is learning that we are going to put into practice. And that's the way Torah learning should be. What we learn should make an imprint in how we live. And so we should learn the Torah that is going to be relevant very soon. And conversely, if we learn Torah about another subject, we should look for ways to incorporate it into our lives, to act upon it, so that it becomes relevant. That's the quality of Yisro. And that's something that's so important for us to understand. Rabbi Shalom Shvadron was an amazing character, a wonderful speaker and storyteller in Yerushalayim. When I lived in Yerushalayim, which is almost 40 years ago now, I had the opportunity to hear him in person, and he was a magid. That means that he would go from place to place, and he would tell stories. And the stories were intended to uplift and educate and inspire. And he was one of the most famous of his day. I remember specifically one Friday night, I went to hear him. I'll never forget it. He was an incredible speaker and an incredible person. And he was very sought after. He would speak everywhere. Every Friday night at a different shul, during the week a few times. He was everywhere. He was ubiquitous. Once, there were two young men walking down the street. And one man said to the other, "Are you going to hear Rav Shvadron speak tonight?" And the other one said, "No, I'm not going to hear him. I've heard him a few times, and he's probably going to repeat what he said before." Unbeknownst to the two young men, Rav Shvadron was walking right behind them, and he heard exactly what they said. So, he was not a shy person. He addressed them, and he said to these two young men, in his inimitable way, "Let me tell you a story." He said there was once a man driving a car, and the car was stuck in traffic. It was a narrow street, and the cars are not moving, and he can't get anywhere, and he can't turn, he can't get anywhere. So he looks ahead to see what the problem is, and he sees in front of his car, a couple of cars in front, he sees that there is a car that is stopped. And it's blocking the traffic and nobody can pass. And it's a narrow street, nobody can move. And he sees the driver of this car is sitting. He's relaxed. He's talking on his cell phone. He's smoking a cigarette. And he's schmoozing. And he's talking oblivious to the fact that he's blocking all of this traffic behind him. And all the cars are honking and honking, but this man continues to sit. He's relaxed. He's talking. And everybody is honking. So finally, the man in the car behind gets out and he is yelling at this man to move his car. So finally, the man in the car gets out of the car. And he turns around behind him to all the cars that are waiting and all the people that he is inconveniencing. And he turns around to this angry crowd. And he says to them, "Why you keep honking your horn? I heard you the first time. There's no need for you to keep honking the horns. Why are you yelling and keep honking the horns? The other drivers were very angry to hear this. And they said to him, don't tell us that you heard us honking. Move your car. Rav Shradran said to these two young men, you may have heard what I said before, but have you acted on it? Did you put it into practice? Until you have acted on what I said, you have not really listened. We need to learn from Yisro. When we hear something important, when we hear something instructive, when we hear something enlightening, it's not enough to just hear it. We have to move the car. My friends, I want to wish you a great day. A day of listening carefully and putting into practice the important things that we hear. And I look forward to seeing all of you soon in person.